The sky above the quiet valley was usually calm, peaceful, and almost silent at night. Stars appeared like tiny lamps, hanging far above the earth, shining without interruption. Ethan, a young mechanic who lived in a small wooden cabin near the forest edge, often spent his evenings outside listening to the soft wind moving through the tall grass. On this night, he was repairing an old generator as usual. The only light came from the lantern beside him, glowing faintly in the dark. Everything felt normal, until the sky suddenly tore open with a streak of blazing silver. A bright flash lit the valley like daylight for a moment. Ethan froze with the wrench in his hand as he looked up. A burning trail, thick and glowing blue, fell across the sky. It wasn't like anything he had seen before. It wasn't a shooting star. It wasn't a plane. It moved too fast and too strangely. The sound came next, deep, shaking, almost like thunder pressed into a small space. The ground trembled beneath his boots, and the trees nearby shook as if reacting to something powerful. Ethan stood up quickly, wiping his hands on his shirt. He watched the glowing object descend behind the forest, followed by a loud crash and a flash of pale light. A dust cloud rose in the air, faint but clear enough in the moonlight. A usual person might have stood in fear or rushed to call someone else, but Ethan wasn't the kind to wait. Curiosity and instinct pushed him forward. Someone could be hurt, and the sound didn't feel like a simple meteor strike. Something inside him whispered that something important had just arrived. He grabbed his flashlight, pulled his jacket tight, and hurried into the forest. The air smelled of smoke and heated metal, something so unusual that it made him walk even faster. Leaves were scattered everywhere, branches broken as if a powerful force had pushed them aside. The deeper he went, the warmer the ground became, like the earth itself had absorbed heat from whatever had crashed. Soon Ethan reached a small clearing where the trees had been forced outward in a wide circle. Right in the center was something unbelievable, a small silver craft half buried in the soil. It had a smooth, curved shape, almost like a thick shell or a folded wing, glowing softly with blue patterns pulsing across the damaged surface. Cracks ran along the hull, giving off faint sparks. The ship looked alive, like it was breathing slowly and weakly. Ethan felt his heartbeat rising. Every thought in his mind screamed that he shouldn't go closer, that this was beyond normal humans. But another part of him, the stronger part, pushed him forward. If something or someone was inside, they might need help. He stepped closer, hearing gentle crackling and a soft mechanical hum. Then came a sound that made him freeze in place. It was faint, almost like a small gasp or weak cry from inside the craft. He looked around quickly. Nothing moved except the dim glowing of the hull. He swallowed hard, took a breath, and approached the ship. There was a narrow opening on one side, likely the door, but it was bent out of shape from the impact. Ethan tried pulling it open, but it didn't move. He tightened his grip, pushed his shoulder against the panel, and with a sharp metallic snap, the door shifted enough for him to pull it wider. A soft, bluish light glowed from inside. When Ethan leaned forward to look, he saw a figure curled near the controls. A person, but not a human. She was slender, with long hair that flowed like shimmering midnight strands. Her skin carried faint glowing lines, like soft patterns of light moving slowly across her arms and collar. She looked hurt, holding her side while trying to push herself up. When her eyes lifted toward him, they glowed silver, reflecting the light like liquid metal. She blinked weakly, confused and frightened. Ethan reached out his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. She pulled back slightly, her breathing fast and uneven. She spoke something quickly in a language he didn't understand. Soft, but full of worry. The tone made him feel she expected danger. Maybe because she didn't know what world she had crashed onto. Ethan shook his head and tried to speak calmly. "It's okay. I'm here to help. You're hurt." She didn't understand the words, but something in his voice made her pause. When she tried to stand, her legs trembled badly, and she stumbled forward. Ethan quickly caught her, supporting her weight. She didn't resist this time. Her body trembled lightly in his arms. warm and surprisingly soft despite the glowing patterns on her skin. He gently helped her out of the craft, moving slowly in case she panicked. Once she stood on the grass, she tried to look around, her eyes scanning the dark forest with uncertainty. Her balance wavered again, and Ethan kept his arm around her for support. She looked up at him with a tired, questioning expression. She touched her chest and said in a weak voice, "Leora." Ethan repeated softly, trying to get the pronunciation right. "Leora." Her eyes softened a little when she heard him say it. Then she pointed gently at him, waiting. "Ethan," he said, tapping his chest lightly. She tried repeating it. Then. Her voice was shaky, but she managed a small, faint smile. The ship behind them emitted a low, crackling noise that sounded unstable. Ethan realized they shouldn't stay near it for long. He pointed toward the forest path, trying to gesture that he wanted to take her somewhere safe. Leora looked tired, but nodded slowly. She leaned a little more on his arm as he guided her out of the clearing. The walk back to his cabin was slow. Leora stumbled more than once, but she didn't pull away from him anymore. She watched every unfamiliar detail of the trees, the leaves, and the sounds of insects with wide, curious eyes. It was clear she had never seen anything like Earth's forest before. Every step seemed like a new experience for her. When they reached the cabin, Leora stopped at the doorway and looked around. She touched the wooden frame carefully. Surprised by the rough texture, her glowing patterns flickered a little, as if responding to her emotions. Ethan helped her inside and sat her on his couch. She let out a soft breath, clearly relieved to finally rest. He gave her a blanket, noticing she shivered when a small breeze passed through the open window. She accepted it with both hands and wrapped it around herself, pressing it close like it was the first warm thing she had felt in hours. Ethan brought her a cup of warm water, unsure if she could drink it. She sniffed it first with confusion, then touched her lips to it. The moment she tasted it, her eyes brightened gently, as if the warmth soothed her from inside. She drank slowly, holding the cup with both hands like it was precious. When Ethan sat beside the table, she looked at him quietly for a long moment, like trying to understand who he was and why he was helping her. She then touched her arm, showing a faint cracked pattern glowing unevenly. Ethan didn't know how to heal it, but he gave her a soft cloth to wipe away some dust and gently cleaned the area for her. She watched his hands carefully, her expression softening with gratitude. Leora studied his cabin next. She walked slowly, touching the walls, looking at the photographs, and pausing at a picture of Ethan with his parents. She pointed at the picture and then at him, asking silently. Ethan nodded and tried to explain with hand gestures that they were his family but gone. Leora lowered her head in quiet understanding. When another cold breeze came through, she walked closer to him without hesitation, holding the blanket tighter and looking at him as if asking for permission to stay near the warmth of the fire. Ethan nodded gently. She sat near him, her eyes still glowing softly in the firelight. After some time, Leora grew tired again. She lay back on the couch, watching Ethan with soft eyes that held quiet trust. Before drifting to sleep, she whispered his name very gently. "Ethan." He sat there for a long moment, watching her breathing become slow and peaceful. She looked fragile, but at peace for the first time since he had found her. He knew her world was far away and she was alone on a strange planet. But right now, she wasn't scared. Right now, she was safe. Outside, the crashed ship lay silent in the forest. But inside the small cabin, two strangers from different worlds had taken the first step toward a bond. Neither of them expected. The morning came slowly, spreading soft golden light across the hills and slipping through the small cabin's window. Ethan woke early, expecting to see the couch empty. He half believed everything from last night had been a strange dream, an alien ship, glowing patterns, silver eyes, and a strange girl named Leora sleeping peacefully in his home. But when he turned his head, he saw her still curled under the blanket, breathing lightly, her hair spread like dark silk across the pillow. For a moment, he stood still, just watching. The glowing patterns along her arms were soft now, gentle waves of light that moved slower than the night before. She looked peaceful, almost fragile. Ethan stepped quietly, not wanting to wake her. He prepared a little breakfast, though he had no idea what she could eat. He kept everything simple: bread, fruit, boiled water, but before he could decide how to explain anything to her, Leora's eyes opened. Her silver pupils reflected the sunlight like polished metal. She blinked slowly, confused at first, then relaxed when she saw Ethan. She sat up carefully, holding the blanket close to her shoulders. A faint smile touched her lips as she said his name softly, as if testing the sound again. Ethan. Hearing her say his name in that soft tone filled the room with a strange warmth. Ethan nodded, smiling back. He brought her the water, and she accepted it with both hands, as if it were something important. She took small sips, watching him with quiet curiosity. When she tried to stand, her legs still wobbled. Ethan stepped forward, offering his arm. Leora placed her hand gently on his arm for balance. Her touch was warm, lighter than he expected. She walked around the cabin slowly, studying everything with careful interest. Wooden shelves, metal tools, photographs, even the window latch. Every new object made her pause, tilt her head slightly, and try to understand. She pointed outside, then at her damaged arm markings, and then at the forest. Ethan realized she was thinking about the crash. She wanted to go back and see her ship. He shook his head lightly, showing concern, and pointed at her arm. She looked down and frowned softly. She understood she wasn't fully healed yet, but she still insisted. She touched her chest, said her name softly, and then pointed toward the forest again. The message was clear. She needed to check something. Ethan sighed, knowing he couldn't stop her. At least he could keep her safe. He packed a small bag with water, cloth, and a flashlight, then nodded and gestured for her to follow. The forest in daylight looked different from last night. Birds sang, leaves rustled gently, and the sunlight made everything bright and warm. Leora walked beside Ethan, her steps slow but steadier than before. She touched tree bark, leaves, and even the small flowers growing along the path. Every small thing amazed her. She watched the sky with wide eyes, taking in the bright blue color as if she had never seen anything like it. Maybe she hadn't. When they reached the crash site, Leora stopped suddenly. Her expression changed, no longer curious, but worried and saddened. The small silver craft lay almost silent now, the glow almost gone. The cracks along the hull looked darker and more serious. She stepped closer, running her fingers along the surface with gentle respect, like touching something precious from her home. A soft sound escaped her, something like a sad whisper in her own language. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he understood the emotion. She walked around the ship slowly, checking its condition. When she reached one side, where the hull had taken the heaviest hit, she placed her hand there and closed her eyes. The glowing patterns on her arm flickered weakly, responding to some connection he didn't understand. When she opened her eyes again, she looked at Ethan with a troubled expression. She shook her head slowly and touched her arm again. She then pointed at the ship and made a small broken motion with her fingers, like something snapping in two. Ethan sighed quietly. The ship couldn't fly. Maybe it couldn't even turn on again. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Leora looked up at him, her eyes softening. She didn't pull away. Instead, she gently placed her hand over his, the glowing lines pulsing lightly, as if responding to his kindness. They stayed at the crash site for a while. Leora walked around slowly, gathering a few small metallic pieces from the ground fragments that had fallen off during the impact. She held them carefully, almost protectively, and then looked around as if worried about being found. She pointed at the sky, then at the forest, and then made a gesture of searching. Ethan understood her fear. If she came from somewhere out in the stars, there was a chance someone could be looking for her, friendly or not. The thought made him tense. The idea of strangers, alien strangers searching the forests of Earth was frightening, not only for her but also for him and everyone nearby. Leora noticed his worry. She touched his arm lightly, shaking her head. Her eyes softened, trying to tell him not to fear. Whatever situation she was in, she wasn't here to harm anyone. Ethan felt some of the tension fade. When they returned to the cabin, Leora seemed tired again. The walk had drained her energy, and her glowing patterns dimmed slightly. Ethan helped her sit down. She leaned back, breathing slowly, and he brought her water again. She drank quietly, her eyes half closed, her hair falling gently over her shoulders. Ethan sat across from her, thinking. She needed rest, food, and a safe place to stay. He wasn't sure how long she would be here, but he knew she had no one else on this planet. He couldn't imagine letting her go out there alone. After some minutes, Leora looked up again, her expression thoughtful. She pointed at Ethan, then at her own chest, and then lightly tapped his hand. She wasn't speaking, but her eyes said everything. She trusted him. Ethan nodded, showing he was there for her. Leora smiled softly. Later in the afternoon, Ethan tried teaching her a few simple English words. He pointed at objects: chair, window, cup, table, and repeated their names. Leora tried copying him. Her voice was gentle and slightly musical, and she repeated each word slowly, carefully forming the sounds. Sometimes she got them right, sometimes she mixed them. But each mistake made her smile shyly, and each success made her eyes brighten. When Ethan said her name again, she placed her hand over her chest proudly, repeating, "Leora." Then, she touched his chest. "Ethan." Every time she said his name, she added a faint smile, like she liked saying it. In return, she tried teaching him a few words from her language. The sounds were soft and flowing, difficult to pronounce, but Ethan tried. Leora laughed quietly every time he mispronounced something and patiently corrected him. Her laugh was gentle, warm, and filled the room with a strange comfort. As the day passed, they grew more comfortable around each other. Leora sat near the window, watching birds fly past and studying the movement of the trees. She pressed her hand against the glass, surprised by the cool surface. She even jumped slightly when a squirrel ran by, her eyes widening. Ethan laughed softly, reassuring her that it was harmless. Leora blushed with embarrassment, but smiled, appreciating the explanation. When the evening arrived, the sky turned orange and purple. Leora moved outside with Ethan, standing near the cabin entrance. She watched the changing colors as if the sky itself were performing for her. She looked up for a long time, her eyes reflecting the fading light. Ethan could tell she missed her world, wherever it was, but then she turned her head toward him. For a moment, she simply watched him. Then she stepped closer, her voice quiet. "Ethan. Thank." She struggled to find the right word. She touched her chest gently, then lifted her hand toward him. Her eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you." Ethan felt his breath catch for a moment. She spoke slowly, but the sincerity in her eyes didn't need translation. He nodded, smiling softly. Leora looked relieved, like she had finally expressed something she had been holding inside. That night, Leora didn't sleep on the couch right away. She sat beside the fire, her knees drawn up slightly, and watched the flames dance. Ethan sat near her, fixing a small tool in silence. Leora occasionally glanced at him, her silver eyes reflecting the warm light. When he looked up and caught her gaze, she quickly looked away with a shy smile. Her glowing markings slowly brightened, not from pain but from comfort. It was clear that being near him made her feel safe. Before she finally lay down to rest, she walked up to him quietly. She placed her hand gently on his arm and held it for a moment. No words, just trust, gratitude, and a connection growing stronger than before. Ethan watched her fall asleep, her breathing soft and steady. He felt something growing inside him too, something warm, protective, something he didn't fully understand yet. Two worlds had met by accident, but now it felt like fate. The next morning came with a quiet softness. The sky above the valley was pale blue, touched by the early sun. Birds sang outside the window, and the cool breeze moved gently through the open door of the cabin. Ethan woke to the sound of footsteps, light, careful, and almost musical. When he lifted his head, he saw Leora standing near the window, watching the sunrise with a calm expression. She looked stronger today. Her glowing patterns had returned to their natural rhythm, soft waves of light moving across her arms. She touched the window glass lightly, her eyes reflecting the golden color of the rising sun. Ethan smiled to himself, realizing how peaceful she looked. Somehow, seeing her there made the morning feel warmer. When she turned around and saw him awake, she smiled softly. "Good morning," she said slowly, practicing the words she had learned. Ethan nodded, impressed by her progress. She looked proud, even though she still struggled a little with the pronunciation. He got up, prepared some simple food, and offered her fruit. Leora accepted it, sniffed it first like she always did when trying something new, then took a small bite. Her eyes brightened at the sweet taste. She nodded happily and pointed at the fruit again. "Good," she said, making Ethan laugh gently. After they finished eating, Leora pointed toward the forest again. Not toward the crash site this time, but deeper into the woods. She placed her hand on her chest, then opened her palm outward, as if signaling something important. Ethan frowned, unsure. She repeated the gesture, then pointed at the sky, then at her arm markings, and finally made a gentle rising motion with her hand. It took him a moment, but he understood. Her people might come. They might search for the crash. They might follow the energy trail. Leora wanted to move away from the area so her damaged ship wouldn't reveal her exact location. Ethan packed a few supplies and nodded. He wasn't sure where they would go, but he trusted Leora's instincts. She had traveled the stars. She surely knew more about danger than he did. They walked deeper into the forest, passing streams, tall trees, and soft sunlight piercing through the leaves. Leora watched everything with curiosity and admiration. She touched the cool water of the stream, looked up at the tall branches, and listened to the wind like it was a new melody she had never heard before. Then, suddenly, she stopped. Her eyes widened. The glowing patterns along her arms flickered rapidly. Ethan stepped beside her, worried, but she raised her hand gently, asking him to be still. She looked around carefully, her silver eyes sharp and focused. A faint hum echoed from far above the trees. Not loud, but unnatural, like a machine gliding through the sky. Leora grabbed Ethan's wrist, pulling him to crouch beside a fallen tree. Her breathing became tense. She looked up at the sky, her eyes filled with fear. Ethan slowly followed her gaze. Through the thin canopy of leaves, he saw faint lights moving. Not planes, not helicopters. These lights moved in a slow, searching pattern, scanning. The faint hum grew a little louder. Ethan felt a cold shiver run through him. Whoever they were not human aircraft. Leora placed both hands on Ethan's shoulders and brought their foreheads close for a brief moment. It was not fear she was warning him, trusting him, telling him to stay quiet. Her eyes met his, filled with a message she couldn't speak. Ethan nodded. They stayed hidden until the sound faded into the distance. Only when the forest returned to its natural silence did Leora slowly rise. She looked shaken, but relieved. Then she pointed at Ethan, then at herself, then at the trees around them. She wasn't just protecting herself, she was protecting him too. They continued walking until they reached a small, quiet clearing far from any trail. A soft breeze moved the grass gently. Leora sat on a fallen log, exhausted. Ethan sat beside her. For a while, neither spoke. They were both listening to the heartbeat of the forest. After some minutes, Leora looked at him again, her eyes softer than before. She placed her hand over her chest, where her glowing markings formed a faint circle, and then she touched his hand, very gently. Her voice was quiet, filled with emotion. "Ethan. Safe." He understood what she meant. He kept her safe, and she felt safe with him. But then her expression changed, sad, uncertain, almost heavy. She looked up at the sky again. Ethan realized something he had been avoiding since the day he found her. She couldn't stay on Earth forever. Her people might come not to harm her, but to bring her home. He didn't want to think about it, but Leora did. She lowered her gaze and whispered something in her own language, something soft and filled with longing. Then she pointed at the sky for a long moment. Her eyes shimmered with silver light, not from fear now, but from emotion. Ethan slowly moved closer and sat beside her, making sure she understood he was there. She watched him, her eyes warming little by little. She lifted her hand and touched his cheek gently, her fingers light and warm. "Ethan," she whispered again, her voice almost trembling. "You, good." She hesitated, searching for the right word. She tapped her chest again, then pressed her hand over her heart and nodded. "Good. To me." Ethan felt something deep inside him tighten. He didn't know how to respond with words, so he placed his hand gently over hers. She looked surprised at first, then relaxed completely, leaning slightly toward him. But their quiet moment didn't last. A sudden sharp pulse of light flickered across Leora's arm markings. She gasped softly and stood up quickly. A soft vibration filled the air. Distant but growing. Ethan could feel it now, a faint rumble beneath the ground, like something large approaching from above. Leora looked at the sky with wide, desperate eyes. She turned to him and grabbed his hands firmly, shaking her head. Her voice cracked as she tried to speak. "No. No go. With me." She pointed at him, then at the ground, then at the sky. "You, stay, safe." Ethan didn't understand why she looked so distressed, but he nodded, trusting her even if he didn't want to be separated from her. Then it happened. A beam of soft blue light streaked across the sky, splitting the clouds. A large circular craft descended slowly, its surface smooth and metallic, glowing like her crashed ship. It hovered high above the trees, silent, but powerful. Ethan felt the weight of its presence in the air. Leora stepped back, trembling. She looked at Ethan, tears welling in her eyes. Tears clear, silver-tinted tears he had never seen from her before. She took one step toward him, hesitated, then suddenly wrapped her arms around him. It was a warm, tight, desperate embrace. Ethan froze for a moment, surprised, then held her gently. Feeling her trembling, she whispered near his ear, her voice soft and breaking. "Thank you, Ethan, thank you." He tightened his hold, not wanting her to go, but she slowly pulled away. She touched his cheek once more, her fingers shaking, and then she stepped back, turning toward the descending craft. A soft platform of light formed beneath her feet, lifting her slowly into the air. She looked down at him the entire time, her eyes filled with more emotion than words could carry. As she rose higher, her glowing patterns brightened like stars waking up. Ethan stood there silently, watching her being lifted toward the craft. Part of him felt proud that she was returning home safe. But a bigger part ached deeply, realizing how much she meant to him in such a short time. Just before the craft's door closed, Leora placed her hand over her heart again and whispered something down to him. He couldn't hear the words, but he understood the meaning. Then the craft rose higher. The light faded, and the sky slowly returned to its natural calm. The clearing felt empty. Ethan walked back to the cabin alone, but something inside him had changed. He sat by the fire that night, staring at the stars, the same stars she came from, and for the first time in his life, they didn't look distant. They looked alive, connected, meaningful. He didn't know if he would ever see Leora again, but he knew one thing for certain. They didn't meet by accident. The bond they shared, the trust they built, the warmth they found, it was real, strong, and unforgettable. Weeks passed. The cabin felt different without her, but Ethan kept going. And every night, he looked at the sky, remembering her silver eyes, her soft voice, her gentle touch. One quiet night, as he stood outside under the stars, a faint glow flashed far above the valley. Not bright enough to be a ship, not loud enough to be anything dangerous. Just a soft pulse, like a signal. Ethan smiled. Somewhere out there, Leora was alive. And maybe one day, the sky would open again, not with fear, not with a crash, but with a return he would wait for.